Oh, well, you're right. You okay? Go live 30 minutes. I think I should be able to achieve that. Hello. I literally went to YouTube. Why did it crash? Oh.
People can be. Booking.com has all kinds of stays because a laid-back beach house is right for some, not right for others. Find exactly what you're booking for. Booking.com, Booking.com. People can be shocked and horrified and appalled, but I don't think anyone can claim to be surprised. And someone who's was referred to prevent kids down upon, round people up and say, you've got to now go and do a parade for this or that. The culture has to change, and I don't think there's nothing. Every time we see one of these crimes, you just hope, is this going to be the one that shakes the government? People coming over here from other places, they're not going to have the same standards of license. At the University of Oxford, he's a biochemist wearing these sort of comedy prosthetic dress. Instant, should be fired instantly. Hello and welcome to this podcast. I'm Crazy Lies and I'm joined as ever by Spike Editors of Centrism. And we're absolutely joined to the host of Heretics, Andrew Bartlett. Hello, what a pleasure to be here. It's been too long, hasn't it? I haven't yet been on. It's been way too long, and we're so glad that you're with us because we've got loads to discuss today and stuff that's right up your street. We will be talking about the Golders Green terror attack, the relentless asylum seeker crime wave, and the bearded Oxford tutor with huge plastic breasts. So a lot of variety there. Before we get on to all of that, just want to remind everyone about the Spiked Summit. We only have 20% of tickets left, so if you've been thinking about wanting to go, get your ticket now. Don't think, because also we're going to announce some more guests very soon, and then it probably will sell out. So please get your ticket now. Tom, do you want to fill people with more details if they haven't heard about the summit?
Yes, exactly. So the summit is our biggest event ever. It's going to be at the Emmanuel Centre on Saturday, the 27th of June. You've already seen some of the speakers we've got announced. Our own Brendan O'Neill, of course, Lionel Shriver, Constantine Kissing, Catherine Burlington, Toby Young, much else besides. If you want to get your ticket, move quickly because as Fraser says, they're going very fast. So spiked-online.com/events, and if you're a Spiked supporter, make sure you log in. You get a very healthy discount. So once again, spiked-online.com/events.
On Wednesday, 2 Jewish men were stabbed in Golders Green in North London. The police are treating this as a terror attack. Tom, this is another brutal attack. It's shocking, but sadly unsurprising at this stage.
And I think that's exactly it, because people can be shocked and horrified and appalled, but I don't think anyone can claim to be surprised. There's been a sort of steady drumbeat of menacing, non-violent attacks that we've seen in the run-up to this. String of arson attacks in north-west London, not too far from where this stabbing took place. Synagogue in Finchley, synagogue in Harrow. There was a business which used to be a Jewish charity, still had the logo on the front, which was also targeted by a firebombing attack, and then everyone kind of turns around and thinks, how did this possibly happen? The fact that there has been this complacency is even more shocking given the fact that it was only last October that you had the Heaton Park terror attack with jihad al-Shami / worshippers leaving 2 people dead as a consequence of that. And also, it was only earlier this year, everyone has completely forgotten about this now, but that enormous plot that was foiled in Manchester, there's 2 foreign-born ISIS fanatics who were trying to get their hands on AK-47s. It could have been our Bondi Beach. It would have easily been one of the worst Islamist terrorist attacks we'd ever suffered, and it would have been fueled exclusively by Jew hatred. That's completely gone by the wayside. So I think the anger is so much more powerful this time around because the authorities, the government can't claim that they weren't warned. As I say, there was a steady drumbeat towards what happened in Golders Green this week, and only people who are willfully blind to it or ignoring it for other political reasons, shall we say, could claim to have been surprised by them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Andrew, the rise of Jew hatred is now relentless, it seems.
Yeah. Well, I can understand it. We're quite annoying, as well. No, look, it's a hard one to talk about oneself, and I'm happy that we've got, I suppose, I hate to use the word allies, because I'm great. But people like you,
And Jews have always liked that. The Jewish people in general didn't go down the whole kind of cultural appropriation route. If someone wants to play a Jew in a film, that kind of thing. Although nowadays they are starting to go, wow, why is it not true of other people that it is with us? But we've always enjoyed that. I think partly because such a small amount. There's hardly any of us. And I do start to feel like there's a lot of, whatever it is, anger or ideology in the Islamic community. There's a lot of very extreme, very angry people. They're going to get through the Jews quite quickly, and so it's important for me to make the point to people listening who are not Jewish and who might be going, oh, it's not really my fight, I don't really care. Like, you're next. That's happening next. So it's first the Jews, or what they say, first it's us, the people, then the Sunday people. So there aren't that many of us to get through. The Wahhabite Jews are the ones who are putting the brunt of it right now, because those two guys who are outwardly Jewish looking, they are very, very, very different. I can't stress enough how different they are as people, beliefs, and all those things to the Jewish people that people listening might know, like David Baddiel or me or various other, Winona Ryder, the cast of Friends, Seinfeld. These are totally different kinds of people. People who, in some ways, I would say, especially at the extreme ends, are quite cultish in and of themselves, but they have nothing to do with Israel, really. They're not really bothered by Israel. Those people, some of them actually actively dislike it, but they're the ones that can take the brunt of the cinema, and they're the ones suffering right now, and Dolly Screaming in particular.
I can understand. I mean, the suspect, you're going to play a game of bingo with some of the things that have been coming out. There are very limited things we know, but someone who's was referred to prevent mental health problems, yet seemingly allowed to roam the streets, and this IRGC offshoot has claimed responsibility as well, so there's the Iranian angle to it. I mean, the patterns are just repeated and repeated, and yet it seems as if nothing is really being done to them.
No, exactly. And I always think it's worth stressing that the growing Jew hatred in this country across the West was building well before October the 2nd as well. I mean, the sewers have burst since then, and you can't ignore it now because you've got the bi-monthly hate marches and the kind of out there explicit headline-grabbing attacks that we've seen of late. But this has been going on for a very long time. I mean, Kelly Bainmont got in a bit of trouble the other week when she was talking about how it's, because of the series of black churches which have been asked us how people would be outraged, there would be marches and so on and so forth. And if anything, the level of anti-Semitism experiences is of a completely different order to the kind of ambient racism that other groups might be experiencing. Without wanting to play into any hierarchy of victimhood, she's absolutely right. I mean, this is something that the head of Greater Manchester who's made this point quite recently in the Woken People Party and the rest of it. Due to the only community in the UK who expect to have to send their children to school behind high walls with security guards and regular police patrols. Jews make up about 0.5% of the population of England and Wales, and they're victims of a quarter of all religiously motivated hate crimes. The best category, but nevertheless, to give you some kind of indication. There would be stories about Jewish cemeteries being desecrated time and time again, which barely break out of the local news. So this willful blindness towards it, you see it particularly on the left, and we might get into the brickbats which have been sent Zach Lansky's way in the wake of this particular atrocity. But even in general, I think society's been very blasé about it because of the fact it doesn't really fit the script. It doesn't fit the identitarian script. It doesn't really make sense, even though it's there in the
I mean, we could talk a little bit about the politics and say Keir Starmer was coming down to Gordon's Green on the day the Will Cordless, receiving huge boos from the crowd. The local Labour MP was also booed yesterday on the day of the attack, as was the head of the Met Police, Mark Rowley. And as you said, Tom, Zach Lansky, although Starmer, every politician, I guess, condemns these kinds of attacks. Even Zach Lansky has condemned this attack, despite only saying not that long ago that we need to have a conversation as to whether the threat to Jewish people is real or perceived.
Yeah.
Which is last week. That was only last week. Yeah, which is an astonishing. It's an astonishing thing to say, especially given all the evidence that is mounting up. But I think he can't be allowed to get away with that shortly after this.
An even greater example, even more egregious example that you're talking about, in what Kenny said, I think, is when those two Jewish comedians, were not able to perform at an Edinburgh Fringe Festival. That to me was almost, in some respects, I mean, obviously not actually worse because of any physical attacks, but that was a moment of absolute silence afterwards. Nobody cared. But we literally had evidence of something people have been saying has been pushed to the side for a long time. We have evidence, and people have been public and honest about it. We just couldn't have them on. Not my fault, because it wasn't safe. Some of the bar staff didn't want to work with a Jew there. Whether that's because they didn't want to be in proximity of a Jew, or whether because they thought, oh, this is dangerous, other people are going to attack them. And that should have been the moment. That would have been a George Floyd moment. Again, not natural death in that moment. But if there was a moment where two black comedians were not allowed to play or do a gig or whatever because they are black, and someone say it's religion or whatever, these people that are not Zionists, or they might be privately, they don't talk about this purely because of their ethnic Jewishness or whatever. They were not allowed to play. That's Nazi Germany stuff. Now, it's one thing that's happening, but the way that news story we just moved on, the way that most people who don't even know that happened, that's happening all over the place. And then Jews can't. I came here, and I thought it would be much better for me to just go to tube to London. I can't get the tube because people scream genocide, baby killer at me. And I don't speak about Islam on the podcast. I really haven't done.
Hello.
Quite a long time. It's really not a big part of my podcast at all. Again, as I said before, I like when others speak for Jews. When you do it yourself, I feel it's a bit whiny, it's a bit self-interested. If you're not going to convince people because they're going to really clearly got a bias. So I'll talk about being Jewish culturally, but I don't do so much on what we're talking about now. It's nice having you guys do it. But that doesn't stop me or Matt Lucas recently, for example, being bothered on YouTube and shouting to that. We're in a really dire situation. But the thing is, where I have some sympathy, people don't like me saying this, with Keir Starmer and with that local MP.
Hello.
What do you do? What can you do? I'm reminded of that, there was the paedophile hospital, a strange name, where Louis Theroux you haven't been admitted. That would be a big news story, yeah. Made that very clear, but he was doing a documentary, and they had this weird situation where it was like, well, these guys are behaving well in here, but we can never let them out. So what do? We go around finding the 1%, and arguably it's much more than 1%.
Hello.
Muslims in this country who equate to 10% of the population, some say less, some say might be significantly more in the census, and we'll take them and put them somewhere, and they never come out again because we can't quite trust them. How do we find out without going into people's WhatsApp and things? Basically, how do we get a hold on this without becoming the authoritarian countries that have got programs, such as the Emirati countries? That's what we have to become, do we? So I don't even know what to do.
Hello.
Your Just Clean bathroom smells great until the next flush. Use Febreze bathroom. Flip to activate. No batteries or
Hello. For everyone that's coming to live, that hasn't come across my lives before, you can call me Animus. I am a goth, and I usually do religious Q&As, but on Fridays I do political live under the banner Goth Centrism, which is a link to my Facebook page that I run. The political live is not a debate live, it's a discussion live, so if you have any opposing political views to centrism or want to discuss those with me, you're happy to do so.
Strange thing for a Palestine side that sees any interference with those carnivals of Jew hatred as some sort of crackdown on free expression, even though these people forefront of cracking down on free expression. Putting kind of limits on those types of demonstrations is on where they can come to with what frequencies, and not, the right to protest is not absolute, and there's a lot of phony war. You're right, there are some people who want to see much more substantial response in the form of cracking down on protests, cracking down on speech. I understand where that comes from, but ultimately I think it is a fool's errand for the reason that you can't do it through censorship, and that is the lesson of history. The discussion this week has become about we need action, not words, so therefore the conversation of what are the actions going to be. It strikes me that even before we get into some of the more drastic solutions people might be contemplating, a lot of low-hanging fruit. I mean, it's obvious that that there has been a remarkable disparity, two-tier if you want to call it, in relation to the policing of and even prosecution
Hello.
and conviction of clear-cut violence and menace inflicted upon the Jewish community. You know that guy who showed up at, I believe it was a Jewish deli with a knife, I think basically.
Suspended sentence, yes. Basically,
slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
The Labour councillor who's cut the throats of Zionists, which we know what that means by Zionists.
Exactly.
He just got off.
And even when you get into kind of thorny questions of speech, which obviously were pretty fundamentalist in those questions, you can't notice the disparity.
Hello.
I mean, again, this is before October 7th, that convoy of cars that was driving around Victory Road, I believe, chanting what basic thoughts for seeing what's going to happen on October the 7th, you know, kill the Jews, rape them, others, rape them, nothing. I mean, again, this was something that was, I think in that case, eventually dropped. And then if you also think about the broader issue with not cracking down on the Iranian threat, which again has been there for a long time, on top of the fact that maybe we should stop importing people who are quite clearly not only anti-Semitic but Islamists and so on and so on. There's a hell of a lot you could do. And also, without suggesting this all just comes down to rhetoric and solidarity, it would go a hell of a long way if when something like this happens, you did see a mass demonstration of all the supposed anti-racists and anti-fascists. That one they had the other month was in response to reform topping the polls, essentially. And yet Jews are killed in Jewish North London. And you get
Hello.
Zelensky, who led that demonstration, one perfunctory tweet, as you mentioned, which didn't use the words Jews or anti-Semitism at all, and then a whole stream of having a go at people for daring to suggest that his party might, in terms of some of the people who washed up at it, put it that way, be part of the problem. So all of these things put together would demonstrate that this is not to be accepted, but also to take actions which would limit the threat that exists to police properly. It seems to me there's a lot that could quite easily be done without changing the law, without becoming a very different society, which hasn't been done, which begs the question why. But some of that's about the culture. I mean, Keir Starmer
Hello.
round people up and say you've got to now go and do a parade for this or that. The culture has to change, and I don't think there's an appetite. There just isn't an appetite. And this happened before regarding Jews, obviously, but in this case it's a very pro-Islam issue. And I do want to hammer that home again to people. This is about Islam. I don't think it's Jews are the first thing. I mean, the issue in Islam is far deeper than people realise. The average person in particular. Everybody wants to believe they
Hello.
signed up to this cult of multiculturalism, and that means that everybody's a blank slate. Everybody's the same deep down, and we always want the same kinds of things. But if anyone who knows just an average, normal Muslim family, not everyone in that family, but many of them will have discussions. People will grow up in an atmosphere where they will speak about Jews eating the blood of babies. That is just very, very normal in many, and they won't. That will not even be contentious to say that. I'm sure some people say, "Not in my family, that didn't happen." I think that those will be few and far between. It is more common than uncommon for that to be the discussion, not just eating babies, but who knows what other kinds of horrible things. I test this. I get on
Hello.
Googles and things, and I have the conversations, and I ask, "Hey, what do you think of Jews?" They don't know I'm Jew. And yeah, those are very, very normal things to be said in those communities. It feels to me like the problem was we could have sorted this out 20 years ago, and I think it's almost too late. So, okay, you can tell people to do, they're not going to do it. And ultimately, we've got, as I said, 10% of the country now essentially is Muslim. They feel angry as Muslims. They're angry because they're growing up in a world and they're going, look, these Jews eat babies. These other white people are degenerates and they hate us. So they're angry.
Yes, I am. And depending on the political issue, I either lean centre left or centre right.
So 10% of society will be a higher percentage willing to view channels. So
Hello.
represented on TV channels, which means that pretty much everybody working at the BBC right now, all the news stations, will know a disproportionate number of Muslims. Many of them have grown up with this idea of Jews eating baby blood and so forth, and who will be a little bit influenced by them, because those are their friends who they're having lunch with and sharing things with, and that will be true in our political sphere as much as it is in our culture and our TV and the news and all of that. So I don't want to sound too defeatist here. I don't
centre right, I lean immigration. I lean more right wing on that. However, I'm not ultra right to the point where I turn like some conservatives are very ultra right leaning and say get rid of all the immigrants. I'm not like that. I'm more slightly conservative when it comes to abortion, though I acknowledge there are medical emergencies that are great cases that need sensitive consideration. There are some women who abuse the procedure, though it's a small percentage. It still needs to be discussed because it is wrong. Because over time, if you overuse that as an option, it destroys women inwardly and physically inwardly. So I lean right wing on that. My immigration views are if you are intended to come over to this country economically and through legitimate means, so you're coming over to better your living circumstances, to better your family's living circumstances, and just want a general relocation and want to integrate into the country that you are coming into, I'm not against that. If you are a genuine refugee or asylum seeker coming from war-torn countries, I'm not against that. What I am against is undocumented migrants or immigrants coming in who are running away from criminal offences they have committed in their own country and abusing our hospitality or any country's hospitality to avoid the charges of their home country and trying to escape and not being reprimanded here.
The editorial policy, essentially.
Economic migrants are migrants who come over economically, so that it's another way of saying expat. So you've, like, for example, you have expats coming over from Africa, China, India. They're economic migrants, so they're coming over here to contribute to the economy and share business percentages. Economic refugees. Sorry, I misread that. Do you mean the refugees who have come over here in the guise of economic migrants? Or are you talking about refugees who are coming over to find a better life?
Tom, I mean, again, this feels like it's relentless. It feels like it's quite easily preventable. Simply enforcing the law might do the trick. But the political class feels totally helpless. They're waving around by the news.
No, exactly. All they can do is try to minimise it and put it in perspective. The thing is, any crime committed by an illegal migrant who is compared to an asylum seeker is by definition a preventable crime. And if you're talking about violence,
if they have come from a war-torn country and or have come from a situation that they're trying to escape from and are trying to better life, I'm not against that. And there are the percentage of refugees who are trying to find a new place to settle and just get on with their life. And that means we can generally help them get a better life, find a place to live. I'm really not against that. No, I'm not talking about this country. I'm talking about if they come from a war-torn African country, Middle Eastern country, Asian country, because there are some war-torn African countries where you do have African refugees coming in. I'm not one of those who are against that. What I am against is that they're not being allowed, they are not being taken through the legal system. Once they arrive on the boats, they should be gone through the legitimate system to make sure that you know,
will just melt
like to get rid of. I know they're initially quarantined to clear themselves of any illnesses, but from that point on, they are not gone through the system, and therefore you don't really know anything more about them.
Said about this, they're fleeing war, they're fleeing persecution. Many of them are fleeing charges in other countries.
I agree. That's actually a very good point. I do agree with that. I think, from what I understand, if the borders open and close, so if our borders are closed, we usually divert them to another country that has their borders open. But I do agree that neighbouring countries should be taking them in. But a lot of them have been put off from doing that because when they have done that in the past, it ends up with them finding out that those that they have been brought in have been undocumented criminals escaping their crimes, and therefore then they bring in their crimes to that country and start affecting the native people there. So that's what's put them off. But I think there should be things done to prevent it more. Thank you for the follow. I do agree that there are some illegal migrants that need to be sent back. You can do, yes. Hang on a minute. Let me pause while I'm watching. What is it you wanted to discuss specifically? Hello.
Hey, good evening.
You right?
How's my audio? How's my audio?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Yeah. Well, mostly I'm interested in the centrist position. I used to be centrist myself.
Yeah. What are you now?
I would say I'm increasingly right wing.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I'm a little bit of a closet goth. That's sort of, I'm not so much about the dress anymore, but at heart, I still
music. Yeah. That's why.
Well, not even the music. I was more of a philosophical goth rather than the music thing. Although I think some music appealed to me.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. Yeah.
More the notion of Weltschmerz, the notion of our ultimate demise, memento mori, this kind of thing that we are.
Yeah, I know you
transient in this, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, what is your stance on immigration overall now?
I think the immigration system has, let's put a context on it. I prefer to speak of a European context. I think that's something that's local to both of us. I'm not informed to speak on China's, India's, African continents, Russia's, or South American immigration policies. And the United States, we might know more about that. I think we get more information on that, but I think it's not local to us. So, on a European context, I think what's made me more right-wing on this is I've noticed that I think what was originally perhaps an operant and good system has been abused to such an extent, and things have been appended to it by the left that are so destructive of European society and of the nations and the cultures in Europe, that and also economies, that it's become a travesty and like a farce of what the intent was. And I think I agree with you on the point that, and I've traveled to and especially lived in other countries, and although in Europe, but even in Europe, why not as a microcosm? Is like the expectation was that you operate there according to their rules. You try to assimilate. You try to operate. Even if you don't integrate, there is an expectation and in freedom there is a right also to maintain your own culture. Like, you don't have to deny your root or your own beliefs, but you are expected to, go along with the quid pro quo and try to contribute and at least not be a problem, or at least not contravene what are the prevailing status quo there. And then involve yourself also in its progression. And I don't think that that's happening in Europe, and hasn't happened I think like the turning point was around 2000. Like, I think I say that for a lot of things. It was the watershed moment. The West changed profoundly in degrees since then. And I think it's just been slipping downhill, making the same mistakes over and over, which just makes the situation worse.
Do you agree with what of a lot of what you just said? My huge concern at the moment, this is something that I noticed before that's been happening over, I think since the pandemic, when I think it's Russian news TV was talking about it. There was a huge increase in illegal migrants being placed into hotels and hostels, and there was no explanation for it. And when they were trying to interview the people who have been put into the rooms, they just refused to say anything. But over time, and this is something that I saw, I think it was like a month ago, by Stop the Boats Media. They went to a hotel to go to check in, and they were literally stopped at the door by a security guard, and they asked, "Oh, sorry, is this hotel closed?" And the security guard was just panicking, saying, "No, you can't come in, you can't come in." And was even calling more security on these people, even though these two men, even though just asking, "Look, we just want to check in." They said, "Can we check in?" And it turns out when they did more investigation, is that they are slowly turning the hotels into detention centers to withhold these people. And for me, that's not good for us, as in economically, because it's taking away money from the tourists, because there's going to be nowhere for them to stay in the end.
What country was that in?
UK.
Yeah, I'm interested because, like, from what I've heard, in my perspective, first of all, the source. I understand that Russian media is state owned, and there is but it doesn't mean that they're always wrong. Like, even a broken clock is right twice a day. But I think the concerning thing is that this would be something that would be brought up by Russian media rather than British media. And when it comes to this detention thing, though, I have a slightly different view on that from what I've understood. From what little comes out of Britain when it comes to this, is that it's quite the opposite. It's not that hotels are turned into detention centers, is that they're turned into immigration, centers which domicile foreign immigrants, also illegal immigrants, and also refugees, pending the fulfillment of their legal process. And these are paid for by the taxpayer. So in other words, it's not that they're being detained there. They're being given everything that they need there at far greater expense than what is paid to the actual British taxpayer. Speaking of your own elderly, your own infirm, disabled, unemployed, who have to, on the dole and get a fraction of what these people get for nothing. And then also the people of Britain themselves, their families are who created the entire system, who paid into the common fund to facilitate this. And now that money is being, given freely, willy-nilly. And in my own country, I'm in Finland, by the way. I'm Finnish. I may sound American, but I'm Finnish. I've only been 2 weeks in the United States. But I was.
Did sound American, but yeah, sorry.
Yeah. I went to expensive international schools in which the language of tuition was in English, and many of my teachers were American, and many of my classmates. So, that's my kind of, but I speak of this from a Finnish perspective, and it happened here as well. is there was a period where it was 1914 to 1917 where there was this like massive immigration wave throughout Europe. Legislation was not in place, and even here, schools were shut down, hotels were closed, and they were instead redirected to the purpose of housing this immigration flood, and of course at the taxpayers' expense, of course, because it's not even clear whether these people come in. There's another myth is like that people that come into Europe illegally, especially, or claiming refugee status, that they don't have means of their own. They do, but they just hide them. But of course there is instances, of persons who are truly dispossessed and who have nothing. But then on the other hand, these typically tend to be the people who have no education, perhaps not even literate, and like their employment opportunities and like they're very difficult cases. So they're essentially in the country on a humanitarian basis, because if they were where they were, then presumably they would not be able to have a means to sustain themselves there. Am I tracking, or are we tracking? Yeah.
I'm fully keeping up. Yeah, what you're saying. Yeah, I didn't realize it was that bad over there.
Yeah, I haven't heard in the UK that hotels are being turned into detention centers. I haven't heard that even once. I've heard though in the United States, even we said we wouldn't go to the other side of the pond, but even in New York, and there has been issue on this, is that some 5-star hotels have instead been remanded that they are on the state pays them to house refugees in 5-star, literally, and it happened here in Finland as well. 5-star accommodation. Yeah. And we had here in Finland our previous prime minister during 2014 to 17. He actually stated he was quite a wealthy man from his own background. He's from by the way, he's from the Centre Party, the official Centre Party of Finland. We actually have a Centre Party. And he said that he would gladly take people into his own home, but he didn't. And instead, somebody else had to pay.
Yeah, thanks for informing me that, because I didn't know, because when it came to European stances on what was happening with immigration, they mainly been talking about Poland and Sweden. But so that's the first time I've actually heard what's happening in Finland, and that is just that is actually very similar to what's happening here.
Yeah, I think it's interesting also because Sweden and Poland. In Poland, they have this is what the EU is. The EU commissars are constantly trying to force them to accept foreign refugees, and they're vociferously against that. Also because they're on the border with Belarus, and there was this instance where via Belarus they were trying to force thousands of refugees across the border into Poland. This, of course, being orchestrated by Russia. So, and Poland has it's possible that in Poland there may be detention centers. I don't think it's hotels, though. It's not hotels. They have something else where they detain persons who are in the country illegally until such time as they can be, deported. And and in Sweden, on the other hand, Sweden is exactly at the opposite end of this. Sweden is the most insanely accommodating country in Europe of this, and to their own detriment. And absolutely not in Sweden. They don't have any kind of detention centers whatsoever. That would be all Swedes would, what would be the British, term for this is like they would lose their shit. Let's put it that way. If even one immigrant was somehow falsely or, not handled exactly with the kitty gloves and served, 3 luxurious meals a day and had the best accommodation possible. That's Sweden. That's how Sweden is.
From what I've been seeing of Sweden, because this all started when Donald Trump was talking about the bomb had gone off in Sweden I think it was before 2020.
Bombs go off almost all the time, every day in Sweden. They have a real problem with immigrant crime.
According to the Swedish people I knew and others, they were saying, "What bomb?" And
or if it's not TikTok friendly, let's call it a B.
Yeah, TikTok friendly. Yeah. And I had to start searching, and there were news articles literally talking about the domestic terrorism going on. There was attacks from the segregated communities, and a lot of the Swedish people go, "That doesn't exist." It's like, it does.
Yeah, exactly. And the interesting thing is, like, when we talk about segregated communities, like, many people assume it's like that the mainstream of society, like the majority of population there, that culture is segregating them from themselves. But in these instances, and especially in the Swedish example, and also in the south of France, is that no, it's not the predominant, it's not the citizens of that country that are segregating them. They segregate themselves. They don't want to be part of the rest of society. They prefer their insular communities.
And that's where I mean, I understand that there are some individuals who come over who struggle to integrate because they can't learn the language, and I think they should be given extra support. But it's those who refuse that I have an issue with, because if they are refusing to integrate and going by the laws of their own country, which can contrast extremely differently from other European and British law, I think there needs to be something done, especially when they're attacking people who literally enter those areas, even though that it belongs to the indigenous people as well of those countries. They are literally being told to stay out, and if they don't stay out, all sorts happen to them, and I don't think that's right.
Yeah, and like on that note, like Finnish is famously one of the most difficult languages on this planet. Even I struggle with it sometimes. Like, Finnish is a hard language to learn and to speak. I think you can learn enough to get by, but like to have a professional capacity, to believably function professionally, to produce texts, especially like if you have to produce text, it's very demanding. So I'm understanding of that in Finland. I think in the UK with English, I think the bar for that is slightly lower. Like it can be reasonably expected that somebody would learn English rather. It's not a at least to be able to become employed and to be able to communicate yourself and not need a translator, for example. Another big thing.
Yeah.
But then the other thing was here about when we're talking about laws is, like, I think generally even in the UK or in Finland or in Europe, in the West, on any continent or country on this planet, the common citizen, or let alone one who is sort of at the bottom of society, they don't understand laws at all anyways. Like, that's why lawyers exist. Like, law is not a simple matter. So I don't think that they don't understand the law. It's that they have a cultural imperative, or they have certain values which are in contradiction with that of the host state or the host population. It's not that they don't understand the law, or they didn't understand the law in their own country in the first place. And it's not expected either to understand the law where you are. Also, it's said that ignorance of the law is no excuse. That's true, but that's true everywhere. So it's not the legal issue. It's that the cultural and the value issues are so disparate. I can only imagine what it's like for them to come into a Western country that is so, in every sense, different than where they came from. And if they don't even begin to try to understand that or accommodate to it or integrate into it, rather insulate themselves from it, well, that's an issue, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree. I mean, I understand. I do understand that there is a culture shock, because every country is different, and how they do things is a shock to those who are not used to it. But there should be a way to, if they really are struggling, to help them integrate, or
I agree.
become
But it seems those haven't worked. Sweden is a good example. I think the UK as well has bent over backwards, like spent untold billions on all these kinds of integration programs, trying to bring them up to speed on what culture they're living in, what the values are there. But the thing is, many don't care. I'm not saying all, but many don't. And I think there's also the thing is, like, this is not the best and the brightest that are coming across. I mean, the best and the brightest have their own means. I mean, they already have means. And in any society, the best and the brightest aren't the majority on a bell curve. It's a certain percentage. And we have our own rest of our not so bright and best to accommodate even in our own societies. So when we add to that with the worst or the least from somewhere else, it kind of makes things quadratically worse. I think also in the UK with the NHS system, as we did in the Nordic countries, is they were sort of fine-tuned machines where taxpayers and productive persons were able to produce enough value so that there was this social collective pot from which then it was possible to accommodate. And sometimes it happens that children are born with severe disabilities, or persons get severely disabled during their life, or otherwise things just don't work out, so that we can take care of the people in our own society who aren't making it or can't, just flat out can't. But when you start adding to that the people from other populations, like the math of that doesn't match anymore. And then the people who are the ones who should be the beneficiaries of this don't get it anymore because they have to split it with however more are added from another population.
I definitely agree with you on what you said.
Well, on a lighter topic, what do you think? How do you find that Goth impacts does it impact your political or social views?
Politically, a lot of the Goths that I've spoken to over the years, when I initially started going into it, became a Goth, they were more left-leaning, and over time they've become more socialist or communist. And there is politically there is a lot of gatekeeping on that regard, because they're now saying you can't be Goth and not be socialist, communist, left-leaning. When I've spoken to original trad Goth or original punk men and women, they say originally it was more apolitical. A lot of us weren't interested in politics. It was literally all about the music, or the clothes. So I think yes, there were some Gothic bands that were political in it, and there were some that were more religious. But it was more a choice of direction that they were taking. But now it's literally being told to many Goths and many alternative people that you have to be this way, otherwise we reject your Goth or metalhead punk identity. And I don't think that's right either, because I hate gatekeeping.
So, am I to understand it? It's become challenging as the rest went left, and you were still centrist. They're gatekeeping you. Yeah,
because when I was growing up, because I grew up in a conservative household, because both sides of my family were Christian raised. So even though some of them weren't practicing Christians anymore, they held Christian values, and I grew up with that. And so when I came to uni, I literally started out as being centrist. So I was open to different ideas, but a lot of the people I was getting to know were very left-leaning, very liberal, very socialist. And my ex, he was involved in the Socialist Workers' Party at the uni we were at, and I explored it because I thought, okay, there were some elements of socialism I do agree with, but obviously I learned over time that in practice it's not good, because once you put socialism and communism into the wrong hands, that's it. I mean, you look at what happened like with the USSR, and what's happening in China. That's the theory of socialism in the wrong hands, because all its caused was people being unalived. So I I was, even though my ex was into all that, I wasn't. But when I think it was within the last year of us being together, I started to become more socialist leaning and becoming very left wing on a lot of things. And now I look back on it, I thought I shouldn't have done that because I just sound like an idiot now. So thanks to my current partner, who's also alternative, I've come back in the middle and I've come back with a level head. And I start calling it out when I see something that's not politically right, or they're siding with things that aren't right. Because I have, I mean, a lot of the Goths now they support Palestine blindly, and I said, well, what about Hamas? How do you correlate?
Yeah. You're asking questions. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I think as you always have. Right? Yeah. But they don't like that. They don't like being asked. No.
I mean, I do support Israel. Do I agree with everything the government does? The Israeli government does? No. But then I think a lot of people will say that they don't agree with everything that their government does, or another country's government does. They share certain values, whilst and that's why they're falling out, because it's like you need to step aside and actually think. I mean, like what's happening in Palestine, a lot of the leftists in the Gothic community, outside the Gothic community, alternative communities, they support it blindly. It's like, well, what do you think about what's happening with the homosexual people? How do you support that when they are on the line?
These are excellent questions. Yeah, like real questions. Yeah, with actual like concerns, like it's actually affecting. These are not like philosophical arbitrary questions. They're actually real. Like it's. Yeah, and how do they reconcile? But of course, I mean, I've tried this as well, and I expect the answers you got were the same as mine. It wasn't. You don't get an answer. What you get is ostracism. And, like a notion that, no, don't ask these, shut up. You can't be here if you don't agree.
Yeah.
And it's not even that you don't agree. It's that you can't ask. And I find that this is like, when it goes to this nature of Goth, if I may for a moment, is like, interestingly, even with my own past, why did I end up right wing? Even from that predication, I think in Goth there was this romanticized notion, and then there was also the cynical, like, oh God, the world is a pretty terrible place, and like we should appreciate the beauty in it, that when rarely it occurs, is like finding the diamond in the rough, not judging based on appearance, understanding from there too that it's not a superficial thing, that there is a real existential like beauty, even in the most terrible circumstances. In the darkest of night, kind of thing, there's still a star twinkling and the moon shines, whatnot. So I kind of went down that path. I don't know that, because it's also the harder path. Like I went perhaps to reading Nietzsche and Rand as another offshoot, and perhaps that's what drew me down. But it's a harder path because it's recognizing, delving deeper into why things are the way they are, instead of closing your eyes to it and just accepting a rote answer on the way they should be, because things are not the way they should be. They never have been the way they should be. It's idealism, and that's completely anti-Goth in my opinion. We shouldn't. It's one thing to look at the silver lining on the cloud, but it's another thing to try to claim that hey, cloud, get out of the way, we need sunshine. It's not going to move. It's there. I don't know. Am I making any sense?
It makes sense. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a bit of idealism every now and again, because it gives people some element of hope. But when you are living day by day with idealism, it can actually cloud your view, because you're not actually seeing it for what it is. And working with what you got.
Wasn't it Oscar Wilde said that, what was it? I'm going to paraphrase something along the lines of, lying in the gutter but staring up at the stars. This kind of thing is like that's an idea. That's a good idealism kind of thing. But I think what they're striving for instead, we're talking about these certain others here, is that I think what they have underneath is that they think that they're going to build an ivory tower and look down upon it all. And they build the ivory tower on this ideology, and it's estranged from the reality. And I think you spoke well on, exactly, maybe this is another thing, maybe at uni, I don't know what courses they were going at. And besides persons that come into uni, it's based on what your primary education was before. It's like, do they even understand like what was horrible about communism in China, in Russia, and where it's occurred?
America as well.
Yes, I mean, also like what the communists in the U.S. were proposing is like what are the actual consequences of what they are proposing, and what are the historical examples of them? I think they are so vested in privilege already, and I hate saying that term, but in this case I think it's real, is that they are so estranged from the actual reality of what it's like. In those systems, they think that they will be the leaders. They think that they will be the ones who are considered good. But they won't. They will be crushed just like everybody else. Like, even the notion, they would not even have, even if they were to change their mind, they couldn't be able to, because then there's the polite apparatus, which tells you no. And that's the one that they're emulating by ostracizing persons like you and myself from themselves who ask questions. It's not okay for them. Don't question the political line.
I've actually noticed there is a
I
pattern.
I think we're more Goth than them. Let's put it that way. That's my view.
I've actually noticed a pattern. Like, if you look at the pattern with socialism, communism, like the revolutions that were started, even like right down to Napoleon, when he revolted under egalitarianism, there's always an underlining of I don't agree with how this system is running, so I'm going to revolt against it and replace it with myself. And Lenin did it when he got rid of the Russian monarchy. He replaced the monarchy with himself, because his understanding of socialism was only one man can rule it. That's the only way it's going to happen. So if one man was above it all, so that's what he did, and therefore, in order to do that, he had to take out the monarchy because they were the only powers in the way. Same with Napoleon, when he got rid of the aristocracy in France, and then called himself emperor. And Italy did the same with the Italian Revolution, when it became the Kingdom of Italy. That was actually due to the fallout of like what happened with the Napoleon Revolution affected the rest of Europe, and so they decided to destroy the individual states in Italy and in Sicily and Sardinia, I believe, and they literally were going to destroy the Sicilian and Sardinian identities in order to unify under one kingdom, when the Sicilian and Sardinian people didn't want that. But at the end of the day, they replaced the system with themselves, and
they did, but fortunately, they also were then deposed. Mostly, by and large. I mean, in Russia, it continued for over 50 years, and in China also. I mean, you were well to point out. I mean, this was just after the Industrial Revolution, and at the time, the West, or much of the globe, was truly owned by monarchs. Like, they were monarchical systems, whether they be empires, kingdoms, dukedoms, or whatnot. And in China as well, like Mao's revolution tore that down. In Russia, the Bolsheviks tore down the Tsarist empire. UK was saved, or somehow sidestepped this, interestingly. There was and in the Napoleonic example as well, tearing down the atrocious excesses of the aristocracy that were completely disregarding of the common people's plight. But I think that was to its time, But now we don't live that time anymore.
No.
So it wonders me why they still feel that they're somehow being oppressed when we live in probably the freest society that we've ever experienced. And yet they still choose this. And I think it is because they think that they will be the leaders in charge then. I think they lack facts, and also they're thinking that they won't have to be the ones that pay. And what it's like living in. I lived in Moscow for 5 years right after the fall of the Soviet Union. I saw the plight of people there, and I caught the tail end of the sort of understanding of what it's like living under a communist system with people like these persons who want to be the leaders of that, how oppressive they actually are in terms of you won't be able to even, if you make even the slightest inkling that you are against the state, you will be socially brought out and essentially hanged. That it concerns me that that's what they want. Whereas then they especially these leftists, usually they're like, no, that's fascism. No, it's exactly what they're doing to themselves. That's what they're prevaricating for and trying to produce as a social. Whereas we're living in a, I think, quite equitable, equal society. And I think as a centrist, maybe I should turn. I keep trying to find reasons to turn more center. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I decided, to engage with you here. It's like I'm concerned about myself also. Am I drawing too far right? Am I getting too upset about things that are perhaps apparent in my own life, but that even then I shouldn't lose the concept of the center? What do you think?
What are the issues you're seeing that's making you want to go more right-wing than you are at the moment?
I think primarily it's immigration is a big part of that. But I mean, not just in my country, but of the EU policy over, and I'm increasingly Eurosceptic. This is another thing. Is like a lot of people don't. It's not reported to us, and even if it is, it's by channels that nobody watches. And even if it is, then it's also editorialized. It's like what the EU is actually doing. I think we're not sufficiently skeptic on this. The UK, fortunately, you're not in the EU anymore. And I actually lived in the UK when it still was in the EU, but UK separated. So now you're not beholden anymore to the EU legislation. But of course, as an immediate neighbor, and you can't move away. You can't just sail your island around somewhere out of the side of the planet.
Yeah. We still have some laws over here that are linked to the EU. The data protection regulation that's still attached to the EU and other ones, and I personally think that's though there are elements in the law that are useful, I think we should be relying on our own laws that still reflect the EU laws. So I think that's where we're still linked up to them, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm kind of two minds about that, because when I was in the UK, I was studying specifically English and European law. So I studied this at uni, and even then it was clear then also that the sort of abrogation of British Parliament, let alone of the Crown, to an EU commissariat, which is essentially the leadership of the EU, was never going to work. There are so many, even though the UK doesn't have a formal constitution, it has so many informal conventions that are so strong that it was almost impossible to reconcile these together. I think the UK did a great job by separating, because it's much worse now in the EU. I think what was also a proof of what the EU is what the EU did to the UK when it tried to separate. The process of that was so tremendously traumatic, unnecessarily so, because the EU was trying to make an example of this, that nobody else leaves. Look at what happened to the Brits if they try to leave. It was deleterious and damaging to both parts.
Yeah, that's when I look back to the politics of Margaret Thatcher, Enoch Powell, they were actually skeptics of joining the EU at the time when it was proposed, because even though at the time it was suggested it was for trade initially, they were saying at the time it's going to lead to more. We're going to be.
Yeah, they changed the deal. They changed it. Yeah, They changed it, yeah.
And
And
then
EU
it
is now
started to
far going
influence.
towards federalization. And it's not something that has been asked of the peoples of Europe. And I think we're constantly estranged, even further distanced, I think deliberately, from the deciding bodies of the EU. I feel that frustrates me. I feel I can't reach or involve myself with EU politics because it's happening somewhere else, and it's like in a separate tier above the common population of Europe, of its
Yeah.
supposedly citizens.
So, what is Finland's relationship with the EU at the moment? Are they separate from them, or are they part of the EU?
Finland is in the EU still. Yeah, I don't think that there will be separation. Not in the immediate future, at least.
Okay.
But there is this also. What concerns me, like on Finland's thing, is like after the Ukraine war began, Finland had to cut off all trade with Russia. And understanding the geography of Finland, this was a terrible, but perhaps necessary. However we look at it, terrible nonetheless. Finland has suffered from lack of trade, and I don't think the EU hasn't done anything for us. And even from the EU perspective, though we joined NATO also, subsequently, is that I haven't seen anything that the EU does for my country here on the border, separated from the rest of the world except by access via the EU. And we're also, we've been, ever since we joined, we've been one of the nations that is a net payer into the EU. You know, in the EU, there are some countries who their economic system is not working, so the other member states pay to try to bring them up to speed. Finland has been one of those. But then I don't think the EU is recognizing or even caring that Finland is already past the threshold of economic collapse from this burden, and I don't see any support from them. Yeah. Currently, we have a right-wing government, but polls are showing strongly that a left-wing government will probably follow, especially on healthcare, social service costs. But this underpinned by the fact that Finland is increasingly indebted, especially to the EU itself, is that we're about to go into a debt slide where we're just paying interest out of our GDP and we have no way to climb out of it. And I don't see the EU doing anything for us to help us out of that. It's like they want us to fail.
When I started to become EU skeptical, and this was long after I voted Remain, I regret that decision. So when it came to the vote of making the final decision, I voted to leave, because it was after I voted Remain that I started looking into it more and found that it was the EU that was responsible for crippling Romania, Greece, and so many other countries economically, because they just refused. They ate the money that those countries made and just left them with nothing. And that's why Greece has one of the worst economies in the world at the moment, because they're financially just being absorbed, and Romania as well. Even though from what I've heard, they're trying to get better, but because they're in the EU, the money is just continued being sucked out, so they're literally just dead on their feet.
Yeah.
So when I looked into
it's mystery. Yeah. I wish something would happen in the EU. I mean, it's a long shot, but something similar. And I don't know if it was completely successful in the United States, but a complete audit, like what Musk did with the Doge project in the United States, is some notion that if this is going to be a federal state, and I don't think it should be, but even as it is, like there's so much money being taken out of European countries into the administration and dispensation of the EU that I really want to. I have deep concerns about what is actually happening with this money, because I'm not seeing it come back here. Like there's no return on investment, and especially when a country like us, who has been paying as a net payer ever since our membership for decades, when we're already underwater, why are we not being helped? Like it doesn't fit my mind. And this, even though Metsola, who is the speaker of the European Parliament, has a Finnish husband, and she came here to, of course, visit Marin, who was our previous prime minister, and famously the youngest prime minister at the time. I won't go into the vagaries of how she got.
Yeah.
She wasn't directly elected, by the way, and nor she was even directly appointed. Her predecessor, the one who was actually the leader of the party at the time. Okay, I said I wouldn't go into it. Anyways, summa summarum, Finland is going downhill rapidly. I don't feel anything from the EU. I'm glad for you that the UK separated. I promise you things would be inordinately worse had you not. I mean,
I did actually find an article. I'm not being able to find it again, but I did find that one of the members of the EU, I can't remember who it was, but they were talking about making the EU a super state. And this was by accumulating all the neighbouring countries into one big state, including the UK, and I thought that's a very communist ideological thought, and I said, there's no way that can happen.
Yeah.
So
there's two ways that can go, right? I mean, it could have been like the USSR also was formerly like a. They didn't call themselves, but it was a federation, but it was under a commune system, like. And so, what is the difference between a federal republic and a communist republic? Well, I suppose it's one that is politically delineated. In a communist system, only if you're communist can you be in the party system. That's probably the fundamental difference, right? That it defines it. Yeah. That's also what we're talking about. Our friends who unfortunately we've lost, who have gone far left. That's what they think they will be the leaders of. They think that they will be the communist elite because they have the political ideals. But then in a federal republic, as it is, like for example, the United States, it works because there's a system of checks and balances that is not ideologically dominated.
Yeah.
But the European Union, as you said, was never supposed to be one. It began originally as a free market, free access, internally borderless for that purpose. Organization. Right. It was never meant to be a federal state. No. And if it is to become a federal state, what color, to lack of a better word, I mean, maybe that's my synesthesia, but what tone should it take? What is the form of its leadership? Is it one that you only rise to the positions of leadership in it if you toe the party line, or is it one that is like in the United States situation where perhaps a two-party system? I don't know. It could work, but the European Union, because we're so disparate historically. I mean, every European country has its own history, its own political views, and those are fragmented internally. My country has 10 political parties. I don't know how many. Romania probably has twice that. These are. How do you reconcile these? Well, in the European system, it's supposed to be that there's already a super parliament. So there's the parliament of the EU. And in that, my country has the representation there is counted according to the population mass numerically of your country compared to the entirety of the European Union. So my country has, if I remember correctly, is it 5 or 6? So the representation of Finland in the EU is something along the lines of, so people that came from my country who are elected by people here, I think they have like 2 or 3% representation in the EU. So my country has 2 or 3% representation in EU Parliament. So what are we supposed to get done with that? All we're ever going to be doing is, kissing up to somebody else to try to get onto their project. We're never going to be the ones who decide for ourselves. It's always going to be the larger states in the EU. And ironically, that's where the UK was one of the most profound members of the EU, because the UK has significant population mass. So you were one of the biggest members. And this also raises the question, is maybe the EU deliberately wanted you out because you were asking too many questions. right? You were trying to subjugate or trying to question why should the EU become a federal thing, especially because it's I think it's part and parcel from my experience in the UK, and it's in your conventions, is that first of all, Parliament is supreme. The Magna Carta has a very old and prestigious heritage. Is the respect of the individual, the rights of the individuals who are citizens there. So it was never going to work that the with the UK being in the EU, they could never federalize because the UK would never have agreed to that. So perhaps they wanted you out. Perhaps they machinated it.
Making it very hard at the same time for us to get out.
Yes, and both because also to weaken you. Then once they kicked you out, they of course
Yeah,
don't
that
want
was
you to be a
yeah.
contender or to have influence anymore. We live in very interesting times. I imagine. I mean, I'm 45 myself. I won't ask or expect your age, but I think these might be things that we might see resolutions in our lifetime.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
probably.
'cause I'm a decade younger than you. I'm nearly 35. But I've in the short space of time I've actually got more political, more open about my views. I'm like I just know there's going to be huge change, but I don't know what that's going to be. But it's definitely going to be in a lifetime. I will agree with that.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. I mean, remarkable things can happen. I mean, nobody saw Trump coming in the United States either.
No,
especially the first elections. So I mean, things can change suddenly, and I wonder if it's difficult here in the EU. I don't know how it is in the UK. Probably, I would imagine even more so. Is also the media is so pervasive in its editorialization on certain political, well, almost all political issues, and what it chooses to report on, how it reports on it.
Yeah.
Is that I wonder sometimes is like how many people actually agree with it. There's another saying. I don't know who it was. I think it might have been Lenin. I hope it wasn't, or was it Stalin? Maybe even worse. Something along the lines is that you only need about 5% of the population to be actively of one opinion, and they can convince the remainder of their views. So why I bring that up is like it's incumbent on the rest of us to ask questions and to be active and aware and not just sort of let it happen, because they would love us to be silent. They would love us to stop asking questions. But if we stop doing that, who's going to do it?
Yeah.
They're certainly not doing it themselves, of each other.
Yeah, I mean, it was last week I was talking about, it was a very heavy subject about immigration and the people that I was speaking to when I was putting forward like the moderate view, like about deportation to certain individuals who are not productive to the society, like they are hurting people, and talking about the UK situation with overpopulated prisons. Like we just can't afford to hold more people because they're actually releasing high level, like class A criminals out onto the streets to accommodate more people that we just don't have the room for. And I was being told, oh, you need to be careful about what you say, or oh, you're so full of hate. And I was like, no, this is not a hateful view. This is being logical, because I'm looking at it from an economical.
I've experienced that as well. Is they go right to, like, if you ask a question, they think it's immediately, they ignore the question and they jump to the thing. No, you're being hateful. Your values are somehow, it's like by asking a question, you're expressing a value that is completely unacceptable in their view. And almost, I mean, they go right to the wall on that. It's like almost to the point of like, that something terrible should happen to you because you're even thinking to ask this question.
Yeah, because the whole conversation of like them saying that I was being hateful came about because I mentioned Stop the Boats media, and though I don't agree with some of them, some of the views that Stop the Media had, and because I was seeing videos that they were putting out, I thought that is questionable, that needs to be discussing. So, but because I supported one element of what they were talking about, I literally said, I was told because you support stop the boats, like, you're hateful. I was like, no, that's not it. But this is why I am centrist, because I listen to both sides, and I don't agree with everything that they say, but both sides politically will have good points, and especially if they're logically sound points. So if Stop the Media or Stop the Boats, for example, says something that is actually worth discussing and looking deeper into, that shouldn't be ignored, especially when it comes to the demographic, not the demographic, but the percentage of, actually no, it does include demographic of who's coming in, what is their background, and they are not being checked. Like, it was 2 years ago in Scotland that they had a security guard from an airport get fired because he went up to the security so that a illegal migrant just walked straight in and nobody stopped him. We don't know why he's here, what he's doing, and they, instead of investigating, they just fired him on spot because he was asking questions. And that was 2 years ago.
I mean, I'm thinking also, like, because I've seen and it happens every day across the British Channel. Is it called the British Channel currently?
Yeah.
Anyways, between Calais and basically the White Cliffs of Dover. I mean, the rubber dinghy thing is insane. It's like, what the fuck? Every day. And what are the French doing about it either? Like, on their part, they're also responsible. And this goes to something I think I brought up earlier, is like, when we're talking about persons coming from the other side of the planet, I think this is actually in the UN. This is something that's interesting to me. It's like, my reading of the UN agreements regarding refugees is that it's the country of first instance in which they arrive from the country where they are in jeopardy.
Yeah.
That is responsible for their care. Mm-hmm. And yet there are persons coming from all around the planet, specifically to Europe, even though we're thousands of miles away. Like, this is something that has to end. And it's not conducive. Why are they also, this is not good for those countries themselves. And I mean, you could argue this as well. Why are they hemorrhaging people? Why are they losing people? And what pressure are we putting on them to fix their issues on the state there, if we're constantly accepting who they force out into our own countries? I mean, it doesn't exactly give them an incentive to change. They're quite happy. They're like, well, okay, good. These people left. Well, fuck them. Go over there and, be their problem. And why are we not holding them to account?
I mean, the other issue that I've been seeing with the boats coming over, I mentioned earlier that they go into quarantine, but because of the huge amount of people who are coming over, they are bringing diseases and illness, viruses, bacteria that are native to their own countries, and there's now beginning to become there's a rise in illnesses in the UK that have long since been, they originally thought were vaccine for. They're now making a rise. There's monkeypox, which is not native to this country, and there's and that is,
well, monkeypox is a little bit of an exception. I'm a registered nurse myself, so if I may for a moment, monkeypox fortunately is still relatively isolated. But I mean, there's two things I'd like to say on that. One is if the originating population from where people came from were not vaccinated, then they may carry pathogens with them into another country, and also in the West, like we have stopped some vaccination programs because we were already of the view that, wait a minute, this has already been eradicated. So, but these people are then vulnerable again to persons who were living in countries or got an infection. They may not be aware of it, that bring it into the country and then transmit it there. Plus, then there's also multi-resistant, antibiotic-resistant strains, especially from some countries where antibiotics are abused, meaning that patients may not even prescribe something, but they eat half of the entire, or not eat, but like consume half of the entire antibiotic amount, and it's not enough to wipe out the pathogen, and it gives an opportunity for the pathogen to mutate into one that is resistant to that tier of antibiotic.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is like there are also, India is an example of this, and this has been shown by studies where it's unfortunately not just immigrants who bring this in, but tourists who travel to India. If you take a shower in a hotel in many cities in India, is that the pathogens are in the water. So as you take a shower in it, and you may not go bathe in the Ganges as many do, that's a different thing. I'm not going to go into that. But like even if you take a shower there, it's already in the water. You introduce onto your skin pathogens, bacterial, viral, and fungal, that are completely unique there. And then you bring them with you. And plus, not only that, but they actually stay with you for the rest of your life. Like they will continue to exist on your skin. Mm-hmm. Whereas somebody who had never traveled there doesn't have these. And this becomes an issue if you have a cut or if you're involved in intercourse with somebody else. Like these can be transmitted by that. So yeah, there is that too.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I didn't know some of that. Because I know
that's tourists too. You see, it's not just like refugees. That's like it's just tourists as well. Can bring
tourists, yeah.
Even though they're citizens of the country.
Yeah, with the tourists, that I do understand that they have already procedures in place to accommodate for that. But my concern is that because there are so many people coming who are not documented, we don't know what they're bringing in, and
we don't know anything about them.
I don't think they're being quarantined properly, because I feel like even though there's a quarantine system, they are being rushed through. But I wouldn't. Yeah. Even though I have that gut feeling, I haven't seen anybody discuss that. But because of that, I think there's going to be a rise in new pathogens that we haven't had in years or even before. I think there needs to be something.
You're absolutely right.
To prevent it.
Surely it was. That's how COVID, regardless of what its actual originating mechanism was, that's how it spread around the world. That's how the Black Plague spread, or the bubonic plague, wiped out 1/3 of Europe at a time, perhaps even 2/3, let alone of Southeast Asia across the route. And also how the Native Americans were wiped out in large part also by pathogens that they had no immunization towards, introduced from another population. That's absolutely underlying. However, I'm more concerned about, because I said like tourists can do this too, and we can't stop free transit of citizens. I'm more concerned about like this. First of all, like the illegal part is like, if you're in France, France should take care of you. But first of all, why are you in France? If you're from Ghana, why weren't the neighboring nations in Ghana already taking care of you? Why wasn't Ghana taking care of you? It's like, why are we supposed to be the ones who are somehow responsible to pay for everything for these persons? And plus, there's the other thing is also their employment rates are not great. It's like, it's not like they're going to end up producing.
I have seen very good arguments. This is some years ago now. I say just before the pandemic, where they were saying, the nations you were born into need you more than the countries that you are going into, because if you stay, you can actually help make the country better. And this is taking in consideration the economic migrants that come over. But they're saying if you come back, the country that you came from have better chances of bettering itself because you have stayed or you have come back. Because if the more people that leave, it actually leaves the country destitute.
I agree. It's an interesting theory also, but generally they don't return because they know things are bad there, and plus they've already lived 10, 20 years or their entire life in a Western country, and this is not unique to the West as well. And even though this happens in Africa also, there are far more refugees within Africa, for example, sub-Saharan Africa, who migrate from one African nation to another one specifically because things are so terrible in their country of origin. It doesn't mean they're much better than in the one next door, but at least they're not under deadly risk, for example. So then they make their lives there, and they're not likely to return either, even though they might want to. But probably even if they were to return, whatever they once owned there will be gone. There's nothing to go back to. And this is, I think, is true of many refugees to Europe as well. It's like there's nothing to go back to. And an example, rather cynically, is Ukraine. It's like that country has been massively depopulated now by immigration. And according to polls, depending on the country, certainly from Finland, I think it was only about, as I've understood it, only about 2% of Ukrainians that are in Finland now have an intent, or I'm not sure what the polling question exactly was. It was something along the lines like, when the issue in Ukraine is resolved, will you return back to Ukraine? I think it was only 2% who said that they would. So they are already gone. And the other terrible thing for Ukraine, of course, is the loss of manpower. Loss of men, lives in this conflict. So, Ukraine may end up, as half a state, even if it manages to keep its territory in terms of population, because people have already left or been deceased during the engagement.
I have seen that is also potentially happening in Russia, because since the war between Russia and Ukraine started, there are a lot of Russians who are leaving and staying away because they are trying to escape being drafted. And I remember,
but they're not allowed out. They're not allowed out. Like they can't. Who are there now? They can't get out unless you're connected, unless you're wealthy family.
I have heard some of them are emissaries. So are they allowed out?
What do you mean emissary?
I'm not very good at meaning, but I think it's more. I think emissary. I got told Russian emissaries were people that came over because they are linked. So I think that maybe would mean they're connected to someone, or they're connected to somebody else. I don't know.
No, I was speaking more about like the wealthy Russian oligarchs. Their children, by the way, anyways, are in the West. Like they only go back to Russia just for, like, they're educated in the West. They they live in New York, they live in London, they live in Berlin. They travel the world quite freely outside without any obligation to return back. And their assets are already in part abroad. But this is not true of the majority of Russia. And the other thing about Russia is, like, in terms of where it's sourcing manpower for this engagement, it's not particularly. It was at first. There's been several stages to this, but most now it's a lot that it's from minority groups that are situated outside of what's called Western, however you look at European Russia. Mm-hmm. So populations that are outside of Moscow, St. Petersburg, Nizhny Novgorod, this kind of, the side of Russia that is sidled to Europe. So Russia has a tremendous expanse. So they're bringing a lot from other groups. And yes, those too will be depopulated. Entire villages, certainly, or mostly, unfortunately. It's like they won't be going home. And the village is left, bereft of their young men. And even older men.
No, it's not. That's actually quite
War is
scary.
terrible. Like, yeah, but that's war, right? I mean, on the other hand, it could be they could just end it, and then that would end too. But they don't seem to be concerned. And
Yeah. What? Because I haven't heard anything as of late, but what is actually happening in Ukraine and Russia at the moment? Because it's mainly been focused on what's happening with Israel and I believe it's Iran and stuff. They've actually stopped talking about the war between Russia and Ukraine. So what is actually happening, and how are they actually dealing with like
on the
refugees?
front, it's a standstill. In terms of refugees, there's issues on both sides. Is that Ukraine has Russian citizens who are on its part who want to immigrate, can't. Then there's also young men in Ukraine who want to leave the country, but they can't because they're required by law now. They're conscripted, so they can't leave. And the same is true on the Russian side as well. So I mean, they're kind of locked in this together. And then on a macro scale, the United States, I'm not sure how much support. I think it's going to be. I think one aid package, significant one, was passed. I think that went through, and then from the European Union also. So I mean, in that sense, Ukraine is still being funded, not just in military material, but also to keep up its civil services, its state, by the West, meaning European Union and the United States. But as to the engagement itself, it's in a deadlock, and certainly no closer to like a resolution. Like neither side is agreeing. Yeah, and of course the U.S.'s focus has shifted to the Strait of Hormuz and Iran now. So
Yeah. Quickly looked at what emissary means, and it's referring to agent. So, because I've heard that there are Russian emissaries over here. I don't know how many there are, but they call them an agent. So I don't know. Is emissary a political thing?
I don't know. It doesn't. I don't think it has a political title, but we're talking about like subversive persons who may have government connections to some intelligent agencies. Those are everywhere, anyways. The United States has them everywhere. The EU has them everywhere. Russia has them everywhere. China has them everywhere. Like this is not unusual.
Okay,
Everybody's spying on everybody else.
Because you said that no one's allowed to leave Russia, I assume emissaries are that exception.
It's difficult to transit out of Russia for Russian citizens now because they're not accepted abroad. And also, if they go abroad, then they may have the question. They may be asked when they return, "Why did you leave?" You see?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Why did you come back?
I didn't realize that.
So I mean, but of course, that wouldn't apply to persons who have some kind of connection who are already on a purpose. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for informing me about that, because I had no clue. Out of curiosity, what is Finland's stance, or what is your stance on the Iranian war at the moment?
My stance or like the government stance?
Either or.
My stance is I'm not sure about the timing, but I think this was always going to happen. Iran has been threatening the United States and Iran for almost 50 years, probably more. And plus, I think the real trigger for this was what happened. We're constantly drawing further from it, but about 3 to 4 months ago, there was the instance where there was the Iranian people tried to rise up against the regime, and they were brutally eliminated. And I think this is what prompted why this happened at this time. Mm-hmm. Of course, there is the Israeli part to this as well, which Mossad is a bitch. Like Mossad does all kinds of shit. But I think that was probably one of the triggers, and it's remarkable to me also that the West has forgotten like what kind of regime is in place in Iran. And plus, Iran also produces into diaspora tremendous amounts of people. I mean, there's millions that have fled Iran in the last 50 years, entire generations. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Like, this was never rational. And then another thing is, like, when it said that it's the United States, or people talking concerns about oil prices and whatnot in transit through the Hormuz Strait, it's not the United States or the West that is blocking the Hormuz Strait or threatening transit there. It's always been Iran.
Yeah.
And opposing it on the other side, there's the UAE and there's Oman, and specifically on the peninsula that extends into the strait, and then further up the Gulf, there's Kuwait and basically all of the other Arab states, and they want to get their oil out. So they have a problem now because they can't get it through. And Iran is threatening all that. Plus, the European Union has its rather complicated energy policy. Some European countries were importing more from the Gulf states in terms of oil. Finland was only taking 10%. We're not particularly reliant on that. But this situation, of course, affects the global market in terms of crude oil. Yeah, but I think like this Iran thing is, it didn't turn out like I don't know if Trump or his administration thought it would be as rapid as the Venezuela situation, where they just went in one night, took out Maduro, brought him back, that was it, and then made a deal with the interim government. That clearly didn't happen in Iran, even though they took out the Ayatollah, and his son is apparently disfigured. I don't think he's going to make any deals with the United States. Like they took out his dad and much of his family. Like he's not going to be happy about that, even if he's capable. So, but this is probably not going to end soon.
No, I can see it being stretched out for a while. Because the last thing I saw on it was that there was going to be a change in the government, because those that had remained were going to be working with the monarch to do a transitional government, and it was on the positive side. So that's
return the Shah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, the notion to return the Shah.
Yeah. Yeah, but that was literally the last thing I saw on it. That's what I mean. I've kind of stepped away from it because there's no resolution. I'm just keeping an eye on what's being said. I was just curious, what was Finland's stance on it, considering their what you were saying earlier. So thank you for informing me of that.
Well, unfortunately, also on Finland's foreign policy, it's very rare that we disagree on a parliamentary level away from what the European Parliament decides. The one person that might, the nominal head of our foreign policy is our president, but our president's powers have been curtailed massively ever since we had a president called Kekkonen who ruled. He ran like, what was it, like 7 terms, something 6 or 7 terms. So there was a reaction to that. But our president used to have the same wide powers as does the president of the United States. And this is an interesting thing as well. Many people don't realize how vast the powers of the president of the United States are versus Congress. But I mean, Finland, but still the foreign policy is ultimately determined, or at least advised upon, by the president. And in this delineation, he hasn't shown any deviation from the European foreign policy. And as the European Union typically is, it takes months to decide anything. And when it does, it's usually wrong. So, I mean, whatever it is, it's not going to be good. It's my prognosis on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for informing me, because I was literally ignorant to some of that.
But what do you think about the UK response? And if I may preamble this because I was involved in a discussion on this some time ago that made me think as well, and I looked up some statistics. Is like Trump has been concerned that many European nations aren't helping, as even though this is not a NATO engagement, but still that they're not sort of supporting the United States peripherally or in the strait in securing it or in actions against Iran. But I think the truth of this is it's not that they they don't want to. It's that they can't, because the European Union simply has nothing to send. We just don't have, neither does the UK, by the way. You can't send your ships there because you need them yourself. Like, it's an extant concern about Russia, for example, and plus the ships are not well maintained. They have issues. It's like it's not even possible. Plus, the economy is not such that it even means to, put up an operation like this, let alone, possibly antagonizing. Although I don't think involvement wouldn't antagonize the Arab states, the Gulf states, but it might antagonize China or India. So the European states are they said that, no, we won't. It's bullshit. It's more that they can't. First of all, they don't have the means. And second of all, they're concerned about who else are they going to piss off somebody else who is doing business with Iran. That's my analysis.
Well, with our involvement in it, from what I understand, what happened is that we only got involved because there was a missile that went disarray and struck one of our cargo ships, and whether that was intentional or not at the time, because it was seen as an act of aggression towards our military base. I do agree with our involvement, because whether or not it was a missile that was not supposed to strike it can still be seen as an act of war or a threat to us. So us stepping in to defend our country on our side, I do agree with it. Though the last thing I saw in regards to that was Trump said the UK doesn't have to step in because America's technically run the war, and I think he didn't understand the full reason why we initiated action. So I did disagree with his stance on that, because though America is winning the conflict, or this particular conflict, I think he came across as a little bit arrogant when he said, "Oh, you don't need to get involved," when we did. But that was not on the interest of supporting America per se. It was to protect our military from offense. So that
I was looking at some statistics here. It's like the UK, just as Finland, even less so. The UK had shifted its energy import in terms of crude oil and LNG. It's already mostly from Norway and the United States. So, regionally, it's funny because, historically, if we were talking 50 years ago, perhaps longer, pre-World War II, the United Kingdom would have been intimately involved with everything in that region. Absolutely, UK was there. It was part of the empire, or it had an empire interest, but those are long gone. So, the reason why I looked this up was I was thinking, does BP, for example, or whatever Shell or whatever conglomerate it's formulated as now, does it still have interest in the Gulf? Well, perhaps it does, but not in terms of energy imports to the United Kingdom. So you're not dependent on oil or gas from that region. However, you are getting it from the United States. So obviously this will chafe Trump. Is why are we sending you gas and oil or selling it to you when you refuse to help us in United States, meaning not us, me, in their engagement in the Gulf. But as I said, I think it's more that you just can't. The British can't afford to send ships down there. Just don't have them.
We are taking a risk doing it. The one thing I did see that cropped up, because when somebody was talking about the missile that struck the Iranian school, and it was originally a ballistic, as in a dodgy missile from Iran, but it turns out it was an American missile that had accidentally struck it because it malfunctioned. And so when I went digging into that to see a little bit more, and it turns out when they opened it up, they found it actually was manufactured in Scotland. So Scotland had manufactured the Tomahawk, and they used that particular particular one on the school by accident, but it kind of made me went grimps a bit, because like we unintentionally struck it by just manufacturing that missile, and obviously not well. We did accidentally cause political conflict between us and Iran, just for the fact it was manufactured by the UK. So I was like, that's not good. But they have
there is some sites, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Effect. I'm looking at, well, just reserving to Google AI here, that there is a effector in Glen Roths in Fife, operated by Raytheon, and but I don't know that it actually here it says designs and manufactures electronic components and guidance systems. In other words, that the Tomahawks themselves are not compiled or manufactured, but there may be companies, and not just in Scotland but globally, that that manufacture the components. So it's just one part of, a Tomahawk probably has thousands of components. Some more involved than others. And then the other thing is, like, I'll, as you said, like, it's just what you read, and also just what I read is also, who knows what is the truth of any of this. I was under the impression, one thing I did read was that they may have been operating under expired intelligence, is that there was the facility next to the primary target used to be a facility that was operated by the IRGC, so the Iranian Republican Guard, or Revolutionary Guard, sorry, and that it had been converted into a school afterwards, and that hadn't come through the media, or not media, the intelligence chain, because I think it's completely irrational that why. I mean, I think it's beyond the reasonable doubt that the United States would have deliberately hit a school. Like, I find that completely implausible. If they had known, they wouldn't have.
Yeah, the left-leaning people I've spoken to, they're saying it was deliberate on their part, and obviously I know it's not deliberate, because it was the missile being misfired and it malfunctioned midair. But yeah, but it's just when somebody mentioned to look into it, that's what I found. I was like, that's not good. Because they only found that it was a part of it was manufactured in Scotland and Fife. When they actually took it apart to find out what went wrong. That's why I just found it kind of ironic that in a very bad way that we unintentionally caused an issue between Iran and ourselves, but just because of the manufacturing side. But it wasn't. It was.
I don't agree with that. I mean, I think rest your mind at ease on that. Is like, I mean, there are bullets for AK-47s, 7.62 millimeters, that are produced globally. It doesn't matter where it's produced, and even that's just. I mean, what is the intent, and how it's what it hits and why is what matters. It's not like what it is; it's why and how. And like, there's no. I don't think that there's any chain of culpability to a facility in Fife, unless, of course, there was, I think I wouldn't trust the Iranians on this either, but unless there was some, why would there? I mean, there's not going to be something like that, that something was faulty with the component produced there that specifically targeted a school. Faulty. Like, that's not going to happen. Yeah. So it's, and then there's, unfortunately, this as well as, like, in all wars, even though weapons such as these are supposed to be precision ordinances, they still have a degree of variation from that. Like, they're not perfect, and collateral damage can occur, unfortunately.
Oh yes, yeah, I agree. With the source of the information, it came from the Pentagon, because they went to the Pentagon to find out what happened, because they found out it was an American missile, and the Pentagon investigated it and said it was ours, and and I think they're still investigating why it did go wrong. But it was initially thought to be an Iranian missile. But yeah, that was literally the last thing I saw on it that was being spoken about. But it turned a lot of the left-leaning people more against Trump, because they say, "Oh, you're blaming Iranians when you did it yourself." It's like, no, but it was a complete accident. It was never supposed to strike the school, because I like you don't see the Americans, in the Republican government deliberately maiming or unaliving children.
Yeah.
Because we're not. I mean, somebody mentioned, like, this is in the 50s, 60s. The progressive governments at the time, the British progressive government, American, they did, whether intentional or not, they actually created the Iranian Revolution because they were trying to get access to the oil, and they say, oh, it's purely UK American, when it was specifically the democratic and independent, or even left-leaning politicians that actually were behind that. So when I looked into that, I thought that's definitely not what the Conservatives would do. So it was left-leaning parties and left-leaning politicians that actually caused the Iranian Revolution. And when you take that back further, that was all intentional, because the communist, socialists, and left-leaning politicians, they've had a very close relationship with the jihadists of Islam. So they wormed their way in to actually take down the monarchy by telling the former monarch to introduce these, like, the equivalent of brown shirts, to control the people, so they could destroy the monarchy from the inside to replace them. And that's why. Sorry?
And then and that's quite a rabbit hole. And then on the other hand, it must also be observed that of the conservative, or the more right-wing interests, they wanted to conserve the Shah as well. So I think there was involvement, and how many fingers are in the pie is not always just the one, even from one country. Like, there can be several fingers from multiple interests that are not working in unison. They are actually, trying to come to different results.
Yeah, it's just because when somebody brought that up, they immediately were blaming just the governments overall. When I dug deeper, it was the one particular political side that's actually just which is what's causing the problems today.
I mean, Iran was a mess at the time, anyways. Like, the Shah at the time was not doing well. Like, he was not loved. That's the problem with the monarchic system. It works nicely, if you have an enlightened despot, so to speak, or enlightened monarch, or if they're separated from power sufficiently, it's well and fine. But it's the problem with that is, like, sometimes, and it will happen, is that eventually you get a generation or somebody who rises to power in the monarchy, to become the sovereign, who is completely incapable of, the vast responsibilities and comprehending what the consequences of their actions are. Fascinating that the UK still has, but then again, you're not the only one. Sweden still has a monarchy. Norway still has a monarchy. Denmark still has a monarchy. Yes. Finland never had a monarchy. We were close.
Yeah.
Luxembourg has a duke, great duke. Let's see who else. Spain has a monarchy. So, I mean, we didn't completely rid ourselves of monarchy in Europe either, even despite.
Yeah. Talking about our monarchy, I don't know whether Finland talk about it as much, but in the UK we have had issues with our monarch, because in the UK he didn't address Easter, he didn't address the traditions of Easter, but acknowledged a Islamic holiday, and we have current issues with him because even though he's the head of the Church of England, he's not representing the church. And then on top of that, there's current concerns with William because he's classed himself as non-religious, so that's actually put the monarchy, when he takes over the throne, in conflict with the church as well, because even though he'll be the head of the church, he won't be participating with as the previous monarch should have. So
well, we'll see. He might change his mind.
He might do, yeah.
But I think for Charles, I have to just say one. I mean, this was I didn't know about this Easter thing, but I do know that he did make a rapprochement with the Vatican. I mean, that was the traditional schism. That's why why Henry VIII split from and created the Anglican faith with himself as the head of it to separate from the Pope. And but Charles did meet with the Pope, so there was one reconciliation. I wonder if it also is like Easter. Is it particularly an Anglican celebration? I think it's more of an Orthodox one, and I don't know that Charles yet has not reconciled so much with Eastern Orthodoxy, particularly with Russian Orthodoxy. But then again, that's very difficult at this time because of this war situation. So meeting with the patriarchate, but there are many patriarchates, but they all convene nominally in what was Constantinople before, currently Istanbul, and Orthodoxy has a different structure. I don't know that. I mean, I know that the British Crown typically, historically, has been quite good with the Greek Orthodox. Like there's a link there, and I mean, many of these families, because the British royal family also married into royalty from abroad, is that there were connections, and of course these royalty from abroad, many of them also were from Orthodox countries, and in those they have their own specific patriarchates. Yeah. But at least he did this thing with the Vatican. I think that was quite profound. I don't know if that got enough attention. It's like, in some senses, the schism was mended between, yeah.
Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I can go all night. You're lovely to speak to. So, I don't know. I would suppose,
I've got to. Sorry?
Dealer's choice.
It's because I've got to go in a few minutes, but if you, because I do this every Friday, so if you want to come back as a guest next week or something and chat a bit more.
Yeah, gladly. And and well, if I may, then if you're about to end, I think it's interesting to hear. Like, I hope there will be more of a Goth resurgence. I think there is in the ethos. There is. It's an interesting perspective. And then this about like why go left or right or center? Like, I think that's fascinating. Like for our sort of subculture, even though we're countries apart, even decades apart. Yeah.
If you've not heard of it already, there's a Goth movement called Goths Against Cancel Culture. They're on Facebook and Discord, I believe, and they are growing in number. And you've got classical liberals, you've got centrists, you've got conservatives, all mixed in there. So if you want to go and check that out, you'll probably find a lot of people you agree with. And they're also looking for representatives as well for meetups. So if you want to go and check that out, they're really good.
Thank you. I might have a peek at it.
Yeah. Okay, I've got to go. So thanks for coming on. It was great to talk to you.
Yeah, You too. Hopefully next time also, I forgot to send requests to my own followers if they would be interested to observe. Perhaps next time.
What was
We
the
need to
question?
pump these numbers. No, I was saying that I forgot to send shares to my own friends and followers that they might have wanted to
Oh,
watch this as well. So kind of like to pump your stream a little bit. Because I think this is good.
yeah, go. Yeah,
I
if
like
you
the way you
want
speak.
to, who's like, oh, thank you. Yeah, if
Before you
you,
drop, you can also let me drop some roses.
what I'll do is when I'm next on, I'll share the live over, and then you can share it on to those who think might be interested. Oh, thank you.
Roses are very gothic. Unfortunately, they're not black, but close enough.
No. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I'll hopefully speak to you next time.
Yep. Have a good one.
You too.
Until next time.
Bye.
Take care.